Is now a good time to buy a house? This is the weekly report on Major Money Matters. Welcome to Major Money Matters. My name is Major, and this is the weekly report. Every single week, we post information to keep you up to date on the economic world and make sense of economic news regarding the housing market and talk about how it may be affecting your home buying or home selling process. If this is your first time to the channel, I do welcome you to like, comment, and subscribe. Stay engaged so that you stay up to date on everything that is going on in the housing market. So I have gotten some emails and I've gotten some comments while I've been talking to clients, while I've been talking to prospects about buying. And they have said, Major, I don't know if now is a good time to buy a house. So I said, well, wait a minute, where are you getting this information from that you're selectively giving me and asking this question? So some of them sent me some articles. I dug through some things and I started to kind of extrapolate some things. So I'm going to share them with you to talk about this topic of, is now a good time to buy a house? We'll get into other news that's being reported in the financial sector and talk about who is reporting this stuff and what their agenda may be. Then we're going to get into mortgage bonds at the end. We're going to do it a little bit different this week in order to talk about in totality and give a good story for what I'm saying here. Okay, so first let's throw up this article. This article from MarketWatch says, ask this question straight out. Is now a good time to buy a home? Most Americans don't think so. And Gallup says it's the first time more than 50% of people feel this way. First of all, why has nobody ever interviewed me or asked me a question about a Gallup poll? I read about Gallup polls all the time. Nobody has ever called me. I don't know where Gallup polls are actually taken. I don't know how the process actually works. Maybe you can help me out. I don't know. I'm 42 years old. Nobody's ever asked me anything about a Gallup poll. But they start highlighting these things that they're saying about buying a house and saying that Americans don't think it's a good time to buy. This at 50%. So if you had a barbecue this Memorial Day weekend, keep in mind that and housing comes up, 50% of the people there, half of the people there, think that now is not a good time to buy a house, according to their survey. One excerpt says, Americans' much more negative assessment of the current housing market may also keep them from looking to buy, which could lead to a slowdown in home sales. Gallup noted in the report, if that happens, it would reduce the demand for housing and could lead to a decline in home values. Well, Gallup, I guess to the extent you're talking about, on a micro level, that could happen, but they are talking about the demand for houses, not necessarily the supply of houses, which we're going to get into later on in this video when they're talking about, hey, the decline in home values, whether that's realistic. But I do want to point out one other thing, one other excerpt from this article. Underpinning Americans' growing pessimism toward the housing market is the expectation that home prices will continue to rise. Well, wait a minute here. You're telling me that now is not a good time to buy a house, but you're telling me that home prices are going to continue to rise. So your person that you run into at the barbecue, which believes that, oh, now is just not a good time. The interest rates are high, which they think they're high. And, it's just not a good time. They're also agreeing that prices are going to go up, which means that if you are in a home, your appreciation goes up and the value of that home goes up, which means your wealth goes up. So if it's not a good time to buy, I don't understand if they say, hey, these same people that say it's not a good time to buy also believe that prices are going to continue to go up. Gallup reported that 70% of respondents said they expect the average price of a home in their area to increase over the next year. So you're telling me that 70% of these people also intend for homes to continue to go up. So what they're saying is it's difficult to get into a home. It's not easy to get into a home. Inventory is low. All of those things are true. But my answer to, hey, is it a good time to buy a home? It is a good time to buy a home whenever you can afford to buy a home. That's when it's a good time to buy a home. all of this stuff about timing the market and stuff like that, you need to get into a home if you can actually afford to get into a home. I want to throw up this other screenshot here of Diana Olick. She's at CNBC. She pushes a lot of negative information about the housing market. And she threw up this graphic because she was illustrating here how much the monthly payment on a home due to interest rates have increased. Interest rates combined with the increased the increased value of that home, how much that's increased over the last 3 years. So she threw up this graphic here talking about how much a $300,000 home was in 2019 and how much the monthly payment was in 2019. And then she correlated that with 2022 with the average price of that $300,000 home being now worth $438,000 home. This is the price increase in home value. And then the interest rate, and then what the corresponding monthly payment is. All of this information that she's putting out is actually correct, which brings me back to my high school statistics teacher who taught me. She used to ask this question: what can you make statistics say? And the answer was interesting. She said, anything you want them to say. And we literally would be in class and we would have the same amount of data, and we'd break off into groups. We'd have the same amount of data, but we had to come up with a different story for the data that we presented. So she's presenting the story that the monthly payment is higher. And that's actually true on the same house because the value of that home has increased and the interest rate is higher. However, what she's not telling you is since 2019, she's been telling you not to buy a house and the housing market is terrible and you're making an extreme risk to buy a house. What she's not telling you is if you did not listen to her in 2019 and you actually bought a home, then your wealth has increased 21% because your home that you bought at $300,000 is now worth $438,000. That's what she's leaving out of this screenshot. All right, I want to go through some other things really quickly. All right, so this other article from Diana Olick. Home listings suddenly jump as sellers worry that they may miss out on the red-hot housing market. Okay, you can say what happened to data, but you cannot say what the internal mechanism was to make them do that. By the way, I don't know anybody that sells houses and buys houses as a commodity. All right, maybe a flipper or something like that. For most people who are buying homes, they're buying them as long-term investments, okay? So you're not sitting at your house and you're like, well, I wasn't going to sell on the macro amount. Some individual people might do this, but on a macro level, you're not sitting at your house and saying, well, I wasn't going to sell, but now I'm going to sell just because I may miss the housing bubble, as some people say. I may miss the hot buyers. And that's not exactly accurate. So she goes on to highlight these things of the supply of home sales jumped 9% last week compared with the same week 1 year ago. And is that accurate? Yes. For example, if you had, 50 homes for sale in an area and it jumped 10%, that means you now have 55 homes for sale, which is not really a big deal. But let's stay with statistics here. You make them say whatever you want them to say. Rising mortgage rates has caused the housing market to shift, and now home sellers are in a hurry to find a buyer before demand weakens further, said Redfin chief economist Daryl Fairweather. Well, Daryl, you can ascertain what is going on. You can ascertain that there's increased inventory, but you can't ascertain that people are doing this because that they're in a hurry to find a seller before the demand weakens. You can't ascertain that because guess what? I told you last week in the weekly report, every single spring, inventory increases. Happens every single spring. So look at this chart here. It shows the active listings in the U.S. And as we told you, from February to now, and well, not now, but because this data is like a month behind based on the pending homes report that comes out a month afterwards. So we're looking at the data from April. From February to April, inventory did increase. That is a fact of what happened, but it happens every single spring. I talked about this last week. Go back and watch the weekly report from last week. I'll talk about why this happened. So I want to get into that now. All right, so inventory is increasing. But guess what? It's not because people are afraid that they're not going to find a seller. It's because it happens every single spring. All right, so from that same report, it quoted Lawrence Yun, who is the NAR, the chief economist at the NAR. He said, home prices in the meantime appear in no danger of any meaningful decline. There is an ongoing housing shortage and properly listed homes are selling swiftly, generally seeing a contract signed within a month. That means you go from contract to closing, what he's saying, is within a month. No mortgage, with mortgage rates rising, Young forecasts existing home sales to wane by 9%. He's talking about the amount of sales, which means that there's people in their home that are not going to list their home because, frankly, they're at a 2% rate, and they don't want to go to another home and pay a higher interest rate on that home. They're expecting that to wane by 9% in 2022, and home price appreciation to moderate to 5% by year's end. So home pricing appreciation, he's saying, will decrease. All right, and that's from Lawrence Yun, from the economist, the chief economist at the NAR, which is National Association of Realtors. All right, quickly here, Mr. Boombastic, I love it. This guy, it's interesting to watch what he says because he's probably the most influential member outside of the actual Fed chair, Jerome Powell. He is one of the most influential members, voting members of the Federal Reserve. So what you're going to see here, he's saying that, hey, in June, we're going to increase the interest rates again, the federal funds rate. In July, we're going to increase the federal funds rate again. However, that increase actually does not mean mortgage rates will increase. Let me say it again for the people in the back. The federal funds rate does not equal mortgage rates. Federal Reserve does not have a direct impact on mortgage rates. I'm going to actually prove that to you. The federal funds rate is increased to hedge against inflation. If you don't remember me talking about this, go back to the video where I talk about the real reason interest rates are rising, so you will understand what happens in the relationship between inflation, the federal funds rate, and mortgage rates. So he's saying, hey, there might be an argument for not doing all of the 7 increases that the Fed said that they were going to do, because inflation is coming under control as he sees it, and he's saying, hey, we're going to have to wait till the summer and wait how things work out. Now let's go to the charts, because you've heard a lot of people say stuff about interest rates are increasing. And I'm going to show you that over the last 10 days or so, that's not entirely true. Take a look at what's happened with mortgage bonds. Now, I've talked to you about this before. This is the sale of mortgage-backed securities. As interest rates go up, or as this chart trends up, interest rates go down. As this chart trends down, interest rates are going up. But look at what has happened here recently. You have a lot of green, and interest rates are actually getting better. Now, some of my buyers participated in what's called lock and shop, and many of them got locked at a specific lender. And when they went under contract, I shifted them over to another lender because pricing actually happened to be better for their specific situation. So if you're looking at the backtrack here, you're seeing that this chart's kind of in a U formation since about the end of April. So we've kind of wiped out all of our losses for the month of May, and we're generally heading back in a very good direction on interest rates. Now, sometimes it makes sense to switch lenders. Sometimes it doesn't make sense depending on where somebody is in the process. But interest rates are generally getting better. But why is no one in the media telling you this? Because they want to control the information. They want to control how you think. Therefore, they're not telling you. I mean, it's interesting because I got people calling me up now about, locking in a rate or maybe a quote that they got from another lender. And I'm like, yeah, rates are actually better than they were about 2 weeks ago. I mean, we're heading back in the other direction. It's the first time where I'm like first time this year really where people have called me and they've been like happily surprised by interest rates. So rates are getting better. Why? Because the Fed actually increased the Fed funds rate. Now you also see a lot of money coming out of stocks into bonds. That's driving up the price of bonds, making interest rates lower. So you see money coming out of stocks into bonds because there's been a steep decrease in equity markets or the stock market, and people are putting their money into more stable investments. So things are looking much better although the Fed increased the funds rate, and they're going to do it again. Now, how long this lasts, I don't know. I still recommend you lock and shop. It's interest rate insurance against things going to hell in a handbasket quickly and you pricing yourself out of the market. So I do recommend that you lock and shop your rate. If something's better someplace else, then we just upload your file there when you go into contract and we close your loan there. That's the power of working with a mortgage broker. All right, that's all I have for this week. We're taking next week off to take some time with the family and take some needed time to dedicate some time to my wife and my children. So we won't be back on a weekly update next week. Those of you celebrating Memorial Day this weekend, to those of us who have served with people who have passed away, and the families who are left behind to endure and to mourn, we pray for you this Memorial Day weekend. Also, to the victims of the senseless tragedy at the Texas elementary school, our hearts are with you. Our hearts mourn for you, and we pray for you. Absolutely, that the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, does comfort you in this very, very tumultuous time. It's an experience that us as parents, nobody could even imagine what you're going through. But our prayers are certainly with you. To our legislators that are figuring out how to address this issue of gun violence in our nation, our prayers are also with you, that you are surrounded by godly counsel and you make decisions in the best interest of our country. That's it for this week. We'll see you next time on Major Money Matters.